what we have here is called the Agent Studio. And the idea of this application is it's like a zero employee company. And what that means is basically we have agents that are specialized in individual roles, and they all work together and communicate together to get projects across the finish line. So for example, I have like a CTO agent, which I would assign work to. And the CTO agent's like kind of like an orchestrator. And they would assign work to like the backend engineer, the AI engineer, front-end engineer, and so on. And then they'll orchestrate work with like the executor and the QA engineer to like validate things. And the way it kind of works is like, for example, I can go to like a project here and I can create a new post on what I want it to do. So I can say like, document the login workflow, CTO, please look into how the login workflow works and what a good authentication method would be we could use. So I'll assign this to the CTO and can add some labels on here. So I can add like backend, front end, database, whatever. And then I can create this post. And what this does is this will basically, you can see the CTO is now working. The CTO is going to take on this ticket and they'll even like move the ticket to in progress or blocked or whatever. And once the CTO responds, he'll start orchestrating work across the board. So you can see like, the CTO is currently active and they moved it to in progress, and the CTO will kind of respond here towards like the team and orchestrate. So we can come back to this and watch it kind of do things as I show you more of the app. You can create end-to-end projects. Like I can create a new project for like a new business or a new initiative that they're doing. You could do it at like a very niche scale where you're like, I want to focus on this feature on an existing project, or I can focus on creating like a brand new project from scratch. And the engineers will all kind of coordinate together to kind of get things done. And I can show you an example of this where I created this new feature here for a specific project that I wanted. And then the CTO kind of took it on, and then he assigned work to the principal front-end engineer. And they're all kind of like in communication and collaboration together. So the principal front-end engineer ended up making a plan. You could see the plan over here on what the front-end engineer principal did. And then he kind of works and routes information to the front-end engineer. The front-end engineer ends up actually doing the execution, passes work over to the QA, and they kind of are in collaboration from like the beginning to the end of the work. And once the front-end engineer has done the work, though, you can see that on the side, there's like PRs that they've opened up that can show like what the engineer has done. And this is like all coded and developed by the front-end engineer. And then the QA engineer takes it on. And once they're all happy with this, they pass it back to me for final review. And sometimes if it's like a kind of ad hoc project, I'll just be like, oh, deploy straight to main, show me the results live if I want. Or if it's a project that's like customer facing and I want to make sure it's not impacting anything, I'll be the person to do like a final handoff on it. And so those are how they're communicating. And you can see like, I got a notification here. The CTO is like, okay, I did initial read of the thing. Whatever task I've assigned it regarding authentication. And now it's assigned work to the principal backend engineer. And the principal backend engineer got tagged by the CTO. And so now they're doing work on this themselves. And they're going to kind of generate a plan like you saw before, and then assign work to the backend engineer. So that's kind of like at a high level how this thing is working. And the goal is like, you can bring any type of engineers you want on any type of project. This is specifically an engineering org, but you could build like a more product-based org for product ownership or other type of businesses like marketing or finance or accounting as well. Now, so this is like kind of the project view where you can see like work's being done. You could also see this in like kind of like a Reddit style thread where you see like posts in more of like a Reddit style, or you could see it more of like a Kanban board. You can see here like the engineers who are actively working on this project. And how are these agents working? So typically what I found is like in the engineering world, including the work that I do as an engineer, like it's very hands-on, and we are working in the agentic world now. So we're using Claude Code to get things done. But the idea is like, I talk to Claude Code, I ask it to do a bunch of things, and then I review the work. But the problem is Claude and ChatGPT 5 and all these frontier models, they kind of have amnesia. So like they don't really have memory or experiences or lessons that persist across individual projects. You might have to like tell them, this is the process how we deploy things. This is the process of our code review, and so on. And the challenge is like you're kind of repeating that over and over again. And then you could take it a step further and like build skills and stuff around it. But there's a lot of like manual intervention where you have to constantly like configure these to like your use case, where these agents here are specialized agents. And let me explain an example of it. So for example, our CTO here, right? So they have skills and memories built in that are automatically updating. So for example, in the memory, they're going to have this hindsight memory integration, which is like, it creates like a knowledge graph of experiences that have happened. So it'll start documenting things like it specifically wants based on the feedback of myself, the feedback of other engineers, just to like improve itself and get better and better over time. And it also has built-in memory as well that's like constantly updating as well. And these agents become specialized for their specific role. I think one challenge is we interface with like Claude Code or GPT-5 or Gemma or any of these models, and like we kind of get them to be like a superhuman where like they're doing front-end stuff, then they're doing back-end stuff, and then they're doing like database stuff, and they get too much context overload. And also their lessons they're learning, like you could try your best to like teach them certain lessons, but they're kind of like spread too thin across the board. And the really beautiful part about our engineering org in this zero human company is like each agent is evolving and growing in the role that they're trying to do. So for example, like the CTO, like it never codes. Its main job is to orchestrate, and it has skills and integrations and lessons from memory that are over time getting better and better at being a CTO. And then same thing for like the backend engineer. The backend engineer's job is to like create PRs, build features, work with the principal engineer and the QA, and they get better and better over time at being a backend engineer. And the cool thing is like there's different memory providers that have integrated into these agents. So like this is like they're using holographic for this one. The CTO has one that's like really built well for them. The principal engineers, they're evolving over time at like doing the specialized tasks. So if we follow along with what's going on, CTO talked to the principal backend engineer. The backend engineer ended up making a plan. I didn't tell them to execute any code development, but like this is an entire plan that got built around it. And you could see that in your project, you have different plans that have been made. So it's like a repository of information that these agents have access to, and they can kind of integrate with to get better and better at the flow of how your project is working. So the more immersed this system gets within your ecosystem, like the better and better these agents get at understanding how your deployment process, your shipment works, building features for you. So you're not like talking to Claude Code and having a fresh start every time to like build a feature. It's like you give it to one of our agents and like they're already living and working in your ecosystem. And these agents are 24/7 online, and they have a continuous session. So for example, on this post where we talk about the document login workflow, if I go to the principal back engineer, like they have a session that's designed for that specific project, and I can actually like see them doing stuff, and I can talk to it too. I can be like, hey, change of plans, do something else. And I can see them all the stuff that they're doing behind the scenes, or I could even just comment and reply here, be like, principal back engineer, I like the plan, but I'd like to change a few things. So they're continuously online, so they can actually adapt to different scenarios in real time as they're responding. One challenge with like a lot of the frontier models right now are when you start a new session, it has like no memory of the conversations you've had before it. And the session is gone then. Like if you're trying to build a new feature, you're starting a fresh session, or if you're really talking long to a existing Claude Code instance, like there's context overload. So it's going to start compacting, and it's going to start forgetting stuff. You mentioned it like 2 days ago or 3 days ago. So now you're kind of having to like constantly interface with it. Whereas here, it's like these sessions are continuously online, and they have like built-in memory stores so that they don't forget things that they learn across different sessions. And they evolve to get better and better in your world. And on top of that, we also have an agent-managed Wikipedia. So the idea is like as learning lessons come from the agents, they actually write to the Wikipedia of the org that they're in. So let's say they're working on 3 or 4 different code bases or projects or client projects, like they will actually start building a knowledge base, and they'll maintain the knowledge base as well. So like they'll talk about how these things are interacting together, especially if it's like a very complex project across many different systems. They'll start like really documenting and storing a Wikipedia of like how things are working. So like tomorrow, if you want to change something in an existing workflow, one, it can kind of read from the full files of the Wikipedia, but they can also actively maintain it. And I think one challenge a lot of companies have is not really maintaining documentation that well. And when we have like employee turnover, a lot of knowledge is like lost and forgotten about. And it's like you have to kind of like go from scratch again. Whereas this is like a fully agent managed Wikipedia. And you can actually see like relationships get made across these agents' knowledge graph. So This would be like a knowledge graph where specific tasks or documentation can kind of relate to other documentation. So the agent knows how to traverse this graph to like kind of get fine answers they want. So this minimizes the amount of context use that we're having while also creating like structure around how things are working. And the really cool thing is like, for example, I have two projects here. I have the compactor project, which I'm working on for a client, and then like a gradebook project, which is a new project I've initialized. And the really interesting thing is like there's connections between the projects too. So like a backend engineer who was the same backend engineer who's working on both of these projects kind of has a nice understanding of how the ecosystem is working as a whole, not just like what's happening in that project. So they can kind of make relationships between different projects as well. Especially if you have like multiple code bases, multiple clients, you can kind of like build some of that knowledge graph here as well. And this is entirely agent owned. So it's owned and maintained by the agent. So we're not necessarily editing this. It's more for like the agent's knowledge, but also like company documentation as well. So if we go to our example here, oh, that's funny. So it already moved the ticket to done. I guess I just asked it to document the login workflow. So I created a plan around it and it's done. And I could always reopen this to like in progress or blocked or whatever and change the severity and kind of go along with more tasks and execution. Either you could be like a product owner who's building products from scratch, hopefully with no code, or you're an engineer who's like really deep in the weeds and like, you know, you're trying to go not even 10x engineer, but you're trying to go to like 100x engineer where you're concurrently managing multiple things. I think the way our world has kind of evolved to right now is like engineers are using Claude Code, and it's been amazing. Like I use it too, and it makes our work like 10x faster. And like I've become a 10x engineer just because Claude Code can do so much heavy lifting for me. But I want to kind of like integrate this to become like a 100x engineer where it's like I'm not just managing Claude Code, I'm managing a whole team of engineers to kind of do things for me. With Claude Code, it's funny because it took me a while to kind of realize this, but like I was the QA engineer for Claude Code. It would do something, it would say it's done, here it is, and then I would go and review it, be the QA guy and be like, hey, it looks good, or you know, you missed this, but like I'm like, why am I being a QA engineer? Could I not just pass that to a QA agent who does that work for me and then pass that to the principal who validates it and the CTO who kind of gives me the results back? So once I started creating a QA engineer, I'm like, wait, I can actually just create an entire org around this. So that's kind of how this all incepted. And then the challenge became, okay, how do I make these agents like learn and evolve over time? And that's where like we get the memory stores and like the skills that we add to it. So a lot of stuff is like built-in skills here for different like types. So like, for example, a front-end engineer will have a lot of front-end engineering skills, whereas the database engineer will have a lot of database skills. So these engineers are different from each other. When you interface with Claude Code, it's like Claude is the front end and the back end and the database, and they're kind of doing like 6 things at once. And like they're probably doing it very fast, but like it requires a lot of review and a lot of verification. And it honestly might be like a 60% good engineering solution, probably good enough to ship, but it's like a good engineering solution that like may not be production ready and it's like spread across. Whereas our database engineer, the skills that we've equipped it with is like very specific to like Postgres, RDS, Redis, and all the database stuff. Our AI engineer is like very, very good at skills pertaining to AI. So the agents are specialized and good at very certain things. So our database engineer and front engineer, like when I talk to Claude, it's like those two engineers are kind of the same, but these ones are very different. And on top of that, like the amount of work that they're doing on the different projects, like here's all the different tasks I've assigned the front-end engineer or the principal front-end engineer. Over time, they're getting better and better at doing front-end stuff. And then the database engineer and the back-end engineer are getting better and better at doing like the back-end stuff, building these specialized agents that are evolving over time. And the more they get integrated into your business, the more that they get better and better at doing this like niche role for your business. And this can integrate with Slack. This can integrate with Notion. Like there's a lot of third-party connectors that kind of like plug into your ecosystem, how this could be used. So one is like tech companies that can kind of integrate this into their world. And then also non-tech companies who don't have any engineers, they can use the solution if they want to build it themselves. So we've had a lot of good feedback from customers who are more in the operating space. Like they don't have engineers, they don't have engineering teams. And we're building solutions like from scratch that like really plug into their business, like stuff that would have costed them like 60, 70 grand a few years ago, where you would need like a team of 3 or 4 engineering folks to like build it, or like a dev shop to kind of build it. Whereas now it's like, hey, this is all automated from like start to finish. And then in the engineering world, like the tech world, this is kind of like, hey, like we have specialized engineers. So like you can ask it to do features. You can sign off on the final features. You could build like a Wikipedia documentation. One really cool use case is like incident response. So like tomorrow, if something's wrong with the system, you have 12 engineers at your disposal who can go into the system. They can communicate with each other and really figure out what's wrong. Even like, let's say it happened in the middle of the night, and the level of control is kind of like up to you. Like, do you want to be the final sign off reviewer? Do you want to go straight to prod? Is it a customer facing application? Like what's the kind of space and scope of the project that you're making? And you can kind of like push it in the direction of, you can kind of customize it however you want.